Good evening, I'm Kathy Lewis, and tonight, because you've asked for it, we bring you another editorial roundtable, and there is lots to talk about. The economy in Hampton Roads, how are we holding up? The governor's race is heating up, at least on the Democratic side, in advance of the June 9th primary. Norfolk was a media capital during the showdown between Somali pirates and the Navy. And speaking of shipping, what about the recent proposal and others we're told to come to privatize the Port of Virginia? Is it a cash-strapped state's boon or a dangerous precedent for one of the most valuable assets around there? And then, of course, what now for Michael Vick? We will put all of those questions and more to Don Lozado, who is the editorial page editor of the Virginian Pilot. He joins us tonight, along with Kimball Payne, who is a reporter for the Daily Press. Michael Schwartz is with us, new to the editorial roundtable with Inside Business, and Kim Lenz is the managing editor of the Williamsburg Yorktown Daily. Welcome to all of you, and thank you for being with us tonight.
Good to be here.
Boy, I tell you, there's been a lot going on. Welcome to the two of you who are new to our little venture here.
Thank you.
Kim, you are undertaking a very interesting venture in the historic triangle that it really is kind of trying to position a new model for local journalism.
Yes, we are. We have an online-only daily newspaper that is powered by our radio stations up in Williamsburg, and it's going really well. No one else is doing it in the country.
So the radio station drives the traffic to the website?
Right. Yes.
And it's all hyper-local news?
It is, but you have to remember this is 150,000 people in the historic triangle, who are paying attention to us and getting, their local news.
And how's it going so far?
It's going really well.
Great.
We are, we keep picking up more readers, several thousand each week, and it's just gaining traction. And
so what stories would you cover there that might not get, say, in the Daily Press?
Wow. Well, we would cover tourism industry, in Williamsburg, maybe a little closer than the Daily Press would. We will, we go into the schools, we just try
really
to hit
focus
lots
on
of
just that area.
Yes,
which makes it such an interesting experiment. We'll look forward to seeing how it goes. Michael Schwartz, thank you for being with us with Inside Business. You've had no shortage of stories to cover lately.
No.
Foreclosures and banking issues and all the rest of it. As your publication thinks about this economy, how are we looking at the moment?
Well, as of this week at least, I mean, things change. It seems every week there's some signs of life. Maybe spring is here.
Yeah.
It was a long winter, and everybody said spring is coming, spring is coming. There seems to be some signs of life in the real estate market.
I heard that from an agent the other night, as a matter of fact.
I heard from an agent who, it was a mid-range price house, $250,000, sold at the asking price within 10 days, which is sort of unheard of for the last year and a half. Could be an anomaly, or I don't know.
Yeah. Very interesting. Yeah. So we'll talk about that in the course of our program tonight. Lots of foreclosure news out there. The other thing we probably ought to talk about is, boy, is this governor's race heating up in some interesting ways. Kimball Payne, you've been reporting on it on the Shad Plank.
Well, I mean, it's the three-headed monster, and they're trying. You listen.
Not to put too fine a point on it.
Well, no, I mean, it's a three-headed monster. You're trying to get airtime with a federal news cycle. You've got a June 9th primary, which means what, 15–20% turnout. I mean, typically in some of these races. So, I mean, they're fighting for airtime. They're fighting for votes. I mean, they know that this is probably going to be close. They're very different characters. They're very different campaigners. So it's really intriguing for wonks like me. I mean, it's fun to watch. It's a case study for anyone in political science as well, because it's money versus endorsements versus strategy. I mean, there's all sorts of layers to this. Creedy's drawing a line down from Richmond and saying, I'm taking out West, and you got to come get it. And so they're really going after each other, and they started mixing it up during the past two debates. Really,
just recently they've really started getting fairly intense about it. Don, have you met with lots of these folks in the editorial roundtables, or how have you all been covering?
We've actually met with all of them now, and they're all smart, charismatic guys around the table, and then they get out into the wild and start hacking at each other as hard as they can. I mean, it's been interesting to watch. Kimball, what do you think? When you look at the amount of money that's being poured into this race, I mean, how do you think that changes the dynamic?
Well, my biggest question is, how does that change a dynamic in a spring primary?
Right.
Because we're talking about something that, I mean, they're saying that this general election rather, is going to be a $40–50 million race. But that's a general election when you're going to have lots of focus, especially lots of focus on Virginia, because there are no other statewide campaigns where a Republican and a Democrat are battling it out on a realistic playing field. New Jersey's governor's race is not as intense as Virginia's is going to be. But right now, we don't know what it's going to mean. I mean, Terry McAuliffe's got great ads of him on a boat. Does that mean anything in a June primary when you've got low turnout?
If you get 10 or 12% of the people to turn out for an election, I mean, how in the world do you even poll for that? You've got these polls that have been all over the place. The latest one's got McAuliffe way up, but I've heard tremendous criticism of the methodology there. So
oh yeah, you can't even. I mean, some of these pollings you can watch and track. I mean, the ones that come out and are suddenly up and down, I don't pay any attention to those because you're talking about something in terms of turnout that's going to be tremendously low, which means whoever on June 8th, whoever's got the best ground game and whoever's out there organized the best, and McAuliffe's got 100 staffers to create deeds with 30 and Moran with 30 or 40. I mean, whoever's organized the best is going to win that race. And
nobody's going to even start paying attention to this thing until 2 of those guys are sent home. I mean, that's kind of the interesting part to me is that I don't hear people. I don't know, Kim Lenz, what do you hear?
I don't hear anybody talking about this really,
except us.
Well, when they were right. So let's discuss. When the candidates were debating at William and Mary, you know, for that first debate. You know, people said, well, I just don't know. They all seem pretty much the same. And, you know, if you're spending all that money, I wouldn't want to be hearing that from people.
But it's hard, especially because ideologically they are very similar.
Well, sure. I mean, they're all about the same age. They're, you know, they don't look exactly alike, but they're close enough, you know. I just think it's...
do you think it's tough for the public to really differentiate at this point and get interested in it?
I do, because I don't think anybody really cares. You know, which is unfortunate because you would think we'd get this huge bounce, you know, of interest from everybody from, you know, the November election. But
I think it's so. Go ahead.
I think people are tired. I mean, that's
so hungover from the fall.
Change is exhausting.
Change is exhausting. Plus, it's been a rough year. I mean,
and people are so focused on their own lives right now, too.
Absolutely. I mean, they're worried about their jobs. They're worried about everything. They don't care. They're not interested. They're not focusing. I mean, I think the question is whether they're going to focus between now and November. Let alone between now and June.
Now, Michael Schwartz, have you talked with these folks with your with Inside Business? I mean, have you analyzed their economic plans and all the rest of it, or?
Not yet. We just started looking at the donations, what they've brought in. The first quarter numbers are in as of March 31st. And that's kind of interesting. Like we were discussing earlier, McAuliffe has the creator of the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers as his top donor. You know, over $200-something thousand.
270,
And it's interesting to see. You know, McDonald's clearly in the front as far as donations. Moran has a pretty good local following, whereas McAuliffe, his money seems to be coming from all over the place.
And then it's interesting too because, and Kimball Payne, I think you were saying this recently. You don't count creeds out of this thing by any stretch of the imagination.
Well, I mean, when you've got a three-way race, and when you've got the two guys who are the consensus sort of front runners in it. It's McAuliffe and Moran. I mean, Creed Eads and Brian Moran have been running the race for basically a year and a half. I mean, they've officially declared
and then Terry McAuliffe sort of came into it late in the game.
But that's plenty of time. Let's be realistic. I mean, you don't need 12 years campaigning for the same spot. Maybe serving in government, but not campaigning. But Creed Eads, I mean, the guy connects well with audiences. We don't see him as much at Hampton Roads as we'd like, but he's not, I mean, you're dealing with people that I firmly believe that people make connections whether they're rational or not with different candidates, and I feel like Cree's got sort of a social awkwardness that wouldn't play well at the national level. It would probably kill him at the national level, but it's strangely endearing, and it's someone who's answering these questions honestly and has sort of, you know, these ideas bursting out of him, and you watch him give this speech, and he's tamping down the audience. He's like, I've only got 5 minutes. I need to get to more points. And it's one of these things that we're talking about a smaller race. I mean, this is still a Virginia-specific race, and I think that that's something that, you know, Virginians will connect with. This is a guy with a ton of ideas and a family, and he's the only guy in the race who's born in Virginia.
Bath County. I mean, he is arguably the most moderate of the three, too, especially on, you know, some of these...
Centrist,
He's a centrist. He's not a, well,
either way.
I say centrist, you say moderate. But, I mean, I think the strategy he's got is, as you said, take everything west of Richmond. I'm not sure that there are enough people west of Richmond to make that a winning strategy, even in a primary.
What is your sense about how people are interpreting. It was when Terry McAuliffe first got in the race, there were people who said, well, that is not going to go well because people do not like a latecomer to the game, particularly one who hasn't held office in the Commonwealth. What's up with that? How's that? Are you seeing any of that or not?
Terry McAuliffe is a very intelligent man. I mean, I've met with him. The guy is a storage bin for names, dates, family members. I mean, and there's stories about him going into a green room with a Republican operative and being like, oh, isn't it your twin daughter's birthday today? Congratulate. And they're just like, you know, how does this guy even, and he's coming up with names, so he connects with people at a tremendous level. But you start talking about how that translates, and he made a point of going to people who had already endorsed and very intelligently said, listen, you know I'm not trying to poach you, I'm not trying to get you to flip sides, I'm going to need your help in the general election. I wanted to meet with you, you know Virginia, what do you know? Tell me what I don't know. Yeah. And this is something that is very intelligent because A, it keeps me from saying, oh, that carpetbagger, he's just coming from New York and he's, you know, Hillary Clinton's guy and he's coming down here. But now I'm saying, well, you know what, he's not that bad of a guy. I mean, if we go ahead with him, so maybe I'm tamping down my critiques. I mean, it's really, that's, when you get I can't stress it enough, when you get a three-person race in politics, it tosses so much common wisdom out of the window.
And what does the polling show at the moment? Still...
the newest poll had some jump in super high. I mean, the closest I've seen, you know, it's 22, 19,
but still pretty
17.
Close.
And then
and so early too. You can't really even.
Well, 45% of people, even in these polls, say they're undecided.
So I mean, whoever wins is going to have to win 40% or close to it. They're going to have to win a plurality, and that's going to be hard to do.
I was talking with some Democrats the other day who said they plan to jump on this vote by the Republicans in the General Assembly to say no thank you to the stimulus funds because of what they would have indicated in the ways of expanding unemployment benefits, that they say they are going to jump on that with 2 feet and make that a huge campaign issue. What are you hearing about that?
It's going to be. I mean, it's going to be gigantic.
And Bob McDonnell said this week. I'm sorry.
No.
He said, "Look, what I proposed is let's take the money, but insist on some provisions to sunset some of those expansions that are."
And he wrote a letter to the congressional delegation saying, "Let us, you know, once the federal money runs out, let this end." But the problem is, this is $125 million in unemployment benefits, and the state would have to start paying out benefits to people with part-time jobs and people in retraining programs. So the biggest concern from the Republicans is, well, once this federal money runs out, we're going to be stuck holding the bag for these extra taxes. It's going to hurt business. It's going to hurt the job growth in the future. The problem with that argument is that took me about 25 seconds, 30 seconds to make. Democrats are making their case in a sentence that long and a devastating sentence, especially when you hear about layoffs, when you hear about companies shutting down every 2 weeks. I mean, you get out on the campaign trail, and if I'm talking in words and you're talking in paragraphs, you're probably losing.
And beyond that, I mean, I think you're right. Tactically, it's an easier sell if you're a Democrat. But our reporting shows that it's $5 a year per employee is the additional cost. So they've taken a stand to turn down $125 million on a tax that doesn't begin for 2 years and is $5 per employee per year.
Which means Northrop Grumman would pay somewhere in the neighborhood of $80,000 a year.
Right.
Which is probably operating expenses.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of shipping, since last we spoke, boy, who could have guessed this thing that was happening with the pirate ship and the Somali and the pirates, and then all of a sudden it's taking place over there, but the news conferences are coming from right out of Norfolk because, of course, the Maersk Lines is headquartered here. And we saw John Reinhardt, the CEO, and there, of course, the captain of the ship after he was released. Thanks to the help of the SEALs. It was extraordinary. Yeah. Yeah. What a local story that sort of played out on the national
amazing
scene,
story, and it was, you know, I think it's one of those things that sort of there's intrigue, there's mystery about what exactly happened, but it is one of those stories in which the good guys won. There was no harm to the bad guys, and we struck back against.
Well, there was some harm
except
to the,
for the two.
Yeah, no, I mean,
kind of harm to them.
But I mean, there were no harm to the good guys. Is what I meant to say. I'm sorry, but and it, you know, it ended so quickly and so precipitously, and it was a strike back against something that we haven't been able to do much about, and the rest of the world hasn't been able to do much about.
I just felt like it was a huge victory at a time when we needed one.
Well, everybody likes snipers on Easter Sunday.
Too much.
I mean,
well, they like the ships. They like the Navy coming in to save the day. I thought it was so odd, all the details that started to emerge. How many people were actually on this ship, this container ship?
It's a huge ship.
Fewer than 20. 17 people.
Yeah.
17 people.
And that's
what do they think is going to happen?
Yeah.
When
you talk about the wow factor
weapons.
Right.
You talk about the wow factor militarily. I mean, you're in a lifeboat in high seas. I'm on the deck of a destroyer. It's dark out. I mean, it's
and
every
you've got to make that
Hollywood
shot count.
writer's dream.
I mean,
it's
got to
not
meet
just
its
one of
mark.
them, but 3 of them.
That's why these guys are the SEALs.
Yeah. Well, I'm wondering, have you talked to
pirates?
Yeah, that's right.
It's not Disney, it's pirates.
Yeah.
Have you talked at all to John Reinhardt? I think that's going to be so interesting to hear what he has to say on the other end of this, because I think he was certainly in the midst of it saying we can't really talk too much about what our plans are, but it doesn't sound like anybody's talking yet about arming these guys or anything like that. It looks like they're going in a different direction.
Yeah, I was in the pilot today. Talking about taking alternative measures besides weapons, speeding the ship up through the choke points and stuff like that. But yeah, they're sticking with that no weapons policy.
The guys on the ship say this is a common occurrence. I mean, I know some of these guys that serve on the ships just locally, not through reporting or anything like that, and they'll tell you, if you're coming down that coast, you hear across the radio, pirates, pirates. I mean,
and
you
it
hear
brings up this interesting thing about, because I think I read in the beginning that on a lot of these, the shipping lines are just sort of, you pay the ransom, get the guys back, let's move on. It's cost of doing business. And so that also is interesting because it brings into play this whole, the commercial interest versus the national interest and what it means when you do that. I think that's going to be an interesting one going forward. As we think about I was thinking about Maersk. You see how I'm doing this? Maersk. Now we move to the port. Did you like the way I get the big public television dollars? It's so impressive, wasn't it? Yeah. There is this proposal on the table for the contracting of the operating company for the port. And this is a very interesting proposal, and I'm sure that we're supposed to, at least I'm told, we're supposed to be getting more down the road. What do we think?
Well, I mean, we're at the point now where the state will be looking at other offers, but this one strikes me as being far too little for far too big an asset. I mean, there's just no way that the offer on the table matches the value of the port to either the state or to this community.
But it's got to be attractive for a very cash-strapped state that's looking for some money to do some port improvements and to do some transportation improvements.
We're not that desperate for money if we're, giving back $125 million, right? I mean,
there's not even.
I don't understand. I've been reading about this, trying to understand how it works, and it's fascinating, a public to private, considering the things that are going on elsewhere in our country, today. I mean, we might,
banks.
we're owning banks. We could own a car company. I mean, the sky is the limit, right? But I think it's really fascinating, and I don't know how much work has been done to look at the companies interested in purchasing the port.
And Michael Schwartz, I think you all have been doing a lot of work on this in the pages of Inside Business.
Is this a pension fund?
It's the majority of it is owned by CalPERS, the California Pension Fund, the largest in the U.S. at least. But I think it's clearly sort of the lowball offer of. Any negotiation.
And does it look like there will be others coming in, other offers coming in? At least that seems to be the speculation.
Yeah, speculation. I think Inside Business reported about APM possibly having an interest in it, which would sort of give them the monopoly hold, since they have their own little port over in Portsmouth now, and that would give them pretty much the rest of Hampton Roads.
I think it's a very interesting philosophical conversation.
Well, I think one of the concerns needs to be that, at least the offer on the table now doesn't have any guarantee to build Craney Island out, and so
the first right of refusal, and that's it.
Yeah, and that's key. Or I've been told repeatedly by everybody involved that that's critical to Hampton Roads reaching its potential. So.
And of course, light rail cruising right along. Looks like 2010 is when it's supposed to be finished, at least if everything remains on track. And now there's this news about the environmental impact statements that are getting underway to look at expanding toward the ocean front, and even some discussion about up to the naval base. So do we think that project is going to pick up some steam? You should There we go. We've got some pictures of it right now. Do you think this is moving along at a quick enough pace?
I think it'll accelerate once we have some experience with Norfolk. I can't wait for this thing to be finished, among other reasons, because it'd be nice to be able to get home in the evening.
Oh, come on now.
Well, Norfolk's downtown. There are a lot of shopkeepers who would really like to see light rail finished, and for a lot of reasons, I think the whole region would.
Sure. Yeah.
I think in Virginia Beach is an interesting question about whether they need to go back for a referendum. They've had one.
And of course, Mayor Sessom's committed to that in the campaign.
And then
says he's going to stick to that.
Well,
is he now? Well, but I thought he said most recently.
Yeah, I think he probably will stick to it. But I think there's some question about whether that's the best course of action. Norfolk didn't go through one.
Yeah, and it would. I have a little final thought about that as well. I think that's kind of an interesting case all the way around. How about Michael Vick? I'm shocked at the amount of conversation there's been around whether he should be allowed back in the NFL. Of course, he will finish most of his sentence in his home pretty quickly here. What are you all hearing as you go out and about?
Well, it's a circus, and it's going to be a circus, especially with the attention that's on the NFL. The NFL draft is now one of the fourth biggest sports in our country. It really is, and it's an all-day affair. So the focus on a guy like Michael Vick, his hometown, with ESPN cameras crawling around, it's going to be nutty. But it's one of those things where, what are we learning from this? I don't feel like I've learned anything from the Vick stuff in a year, and I feel bad saying it just because, our papers covered it because he's a hometown guy. But at this point, what don't you know that you want to know about Michael Vick, other than the fact of what will happen with the National Football League?
Right.
And
where
will
he go
on the construction job?
Do you really want to know what he's doing
construction? Cameras will be at that construction.
You can bank on that. You can bank on that. But are you hearing? We did a radio show about this about a week or so ago. It's very surprising. We had a lot of people call. Not a lot of people. We had some people call and say, you know what? I don't think he should be allowed back in the NFL. What he did was wrong. We had other people call and say, look, he's paid his debt. He's done what we asked him to do. Give him a shot at sort of bringing this thing back full circle, or trying to bring some good out of it in some sort of way.
I'm amazed that people, care so much about this, considering the other things we could care about and maybe affect with, our passion. This just seems, there's somebody, I don't know who it was, I wish I did because I would give him credit, but said resentment is like drinking poison and waiting for the other person to die. And so if they resent, Michael Vick's success, his athleticism, and the pass he got by serving, almost, 20, well, he'll be serving 20 months, getting out of jail 3 months early.
Well,
I don't know.
And on that cheery note, we will wrap it up. Thank you, Ken.
I'm so glad to do that.
It's good to see you. I'll be back in a moment with a final thought. Just a few weeks ago, I had the occasion to gaze out the penthouse windows at the Weston Town Center residences. Now, lest you think I was putting down a deposit, we don't make that kind of money in public broadcasting. But it is a $1 million view, and after you enjoy that arcing panorama from the bay to the oceanfront, you look down to see a stretch of railroad track that looks an awful lot like the future to me. Consider these recent developments. Earlier this month, Hampton Roads Transit committed to an environmental study on extending the line from its current terminus at Newtown Road all the way to the oceanfront. The beach is also considering buying the now vacant Circuit City property near Town Center for a potential light rail station. Meanwhile, Beach Mayor Will Sessoms, who says he's a big believer in light rail as a business builder, said that on this broadcast, says he made a mistake during the campaign when he committed to a referendum on light rail. But last we heard he's planning to honor that commitment. Boy, with all that stimulus money floating around and all the energy around it, it may be a real opportunity if the powers that be could agree to extend the light rail just to Town Center for now. Maybe Mayor Sessoms could be forgiven for going back on that pledge. We're just a Town Center. The idea would be to connect two major business, residential, and entertainment centers that open early in the morning and stay open late into the night. Let's face it, with all due respect, Newtown Road isn't exactly hopping after hours, but a strong nightlife at either end of the light rail would encourage ridership and give the beach a chance to see whether it wants to extend the line all the way to the oceanfront. The beach has already committed $10 million for its share of the track, and the state's into the deal for $20 million. Money tends to move things along, and if the dollars can be found to get light rail to Town Center quickly, then council may get the opportunity to act without the guidance of a referendum. And it seems to me that's what we elect our leaders to do anyway. And besides, we all get to take part in the ultimate referendum every 4 years. We'd love to hear from you, and if there are story ideas you want us to do, shows you want us to do, it's so easy to be in touch. And here's a quick look at what we're working on in the coming weeks on What Matters. We'll find out from those who promote tourism in the area what they're doing to bring dollars into the region and what's out there for those who are choosing a staycation this year to save money. That's everybody in the newspaper business right there. We'll also share a special half hour with the last nun at St. Mary's Home for Disabled Children. It's an amazing story. Sister Mary June Morin has spent 50 remarkable years in religious life. All that and more in the coming weeks. We'll also have 3 local college and university presidents joining us in the coming weeks to talk about the state of higher education in Hampton Roads. And here's how you can stay on top of what's going on with What Matters. We'll send you a weekly e-bit to your email box, and you can sign up for that at our website, which is at whatmatters.tv, and we'll email you weekly updates. While you're there, you can send us an email or join us as a fan on our Facebook page, because we're so doggone hip, to tell us what matters to you. There you have it. Send your letters to 5200 Hampton. We are hip, Michael, I promise. 5200 Hampton Boulevard, Norfolk, Virginia, 23508. I'm getting arguments on the degree of our hipness, but we're claiming it. That's our story, and we're sticking with it. And we'll see you right back here next Friday night for another look at What Matters.